My name's Tim Brown. I'm really excited to speak at the Velocity kickoff. I'm the co-founder of Allbirds. I'm a venture partner at Icehouse Ventures here in Auckland, part owner of Auckland FC, second in the table. That's about to change. And very proud to be this year an executive at residence at the University of Auckland and teaching here at the business school. So I look forward to meeting you all and sharing a little bit of my story. Thank you.
To go back to when you first had your idea for Allbirds, what's one advice you could give yourself?
Well, don't do it. And I mean that sort of half seriously. Building a business is one of the hardest things you can ever do. And knowing now just how difficult it was, I might advise my younger self to maybe pick an easier path. That being said, it's one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. Building the business that I built changed my life, challenged me in ways that I could never have imagined, and was the start of so many great relationships. So, but it's difficult. And I think sometimes we romance entrepreneurship, and I think it's really, really important. And I'll share in my remarks when I meet your community soon, just how difficult it can be to get something off the ground.
I think throughout your entrepreneurial journey, I think there were a lot of times where you've had to pivot, or you've had to stay with something, even though you might have had other ideas. Could you maybe walk me through a time where you've either pivoted or you've been like, let's stay with this idea, even if you've had other thoughts about it, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's probably at the heart of the early stages of an entrepreneurial idea. I think oftentimes what I found as someone who was new to building a business, had never been to business school in the early stages of thinking about my idea, certainly wasn't from the category footwear that I was entering. And what I found was there were a lot of experts that came out of the woodwork to give me the 10 reasons why my idea would never work. And in those moments, I had to steel myself to actually say or learn that I really had to believe I had a unique take, a unique perspective, and unique angle. Maybe because of my naivety, I was able to see things that people with much more experience had maybe missed. So that's one piece of it. And then sometimes, particularly as you start to build a business, you put something out in the world, you have to have an incredible ability to listen and then to shift and adjust based on what your customers, more often than not, will tell you, or sometimes not what they tell you, but what they do with your product. And if you're ignoring that, then you're inevitably going to fail. And so, again, how do you develop an ability to trust your instinct on when I have to ignore feedback? And how do I develop a feeling for when I really need to listen? And there's no answer to that, except what I would say is my experience, both as a founder and now in my capacity in venture capital, evaluating potential founders, is they tend to have very strong opinions on the world, loosely held. They understand the dent that they want to make in the universe, and they were unwavering in their connection to that purpose and that vision. But they are incredibly nimble. They are students of the game and prepared to adjust, take on new information. They're eminently coachable, and they want to learn relentlessly. And oftentimes, those learnings involve them adjusting their journey along the way to get to where they want to go. So, again, competing ideas that you have to hold together at the same time as an entrepreneur, I believe.
Was that idea of students of the game, was that something that translated from your football career to your entrepreneurial career, do you think? Or is it something that you've had to develop differently to the football field?
No, I think it's very, very similar. The people that were the best at sport were always looking for that little edge. They were voracious observers of people that were doing things really, really well, and they were not afraid to incorporate best practice into their own approach to work and improving and being a professional. And so is true in entrepreneurship. I think the best founders that we see at Icehouse are constantly curious about how they can improve, how they can optimize. And oftentimes they need to do that, and they need to do that quickly because in the context of entrepreneurship, you go from very, very quickly, one man and his dog, an idea, to managing tens, hundreds, or even thousands of people quite quickly. So your ability to learn, your curve, needs to be extremely sharp. And so you need to be a student of how to lead people, how to build teams very, very quickly, a whole set of skills that are beyond the product or service that you've developed initially. So the only people that do that well are the ones that are able to grow and learn very, very quickly.
I think a lot of people, especially our age, are very skeptical to take those challenges, those extra steps, and I think we've been taught to play it safe, if that makes sense. What would be your advice or anything you can tell our generation to maybe take that next leap forward, take that challenge? Not necessarily to be an entrepreneur, but to take those maybe pathways that aren't so conventional.
Look, everyone's context is different, and as I explained in your previous question, entrepreneurship is really difficult. It's not for everyone. I think we tend to romance the journey, and it's not easy. Certainly, super talented people like graduates from the University of Auckland are going to have lots of options, well-paying careers. So it's very, very difficult to say. And not everyone was born to found a business. And even for me, I started my entrepreneurial journey almost by default because I couldn't find another job. So it's very, very, it's not easy or right for me to say that, yes, you should go do it. But what I would say is, even if that opportunity does present itself and you decide that that's something that you want to have a crack at, I promise you it will be difficult. And I can't promise you that it will be successful, but I can be very sure that the experience that you gain from that will accelerate your learning to all the other careers that are still going to be there when your business goes into flames and fails publicly and disastrously. Those other careers in consulting or finance or whatever it is are still going to be there. And I would posit that you are going to be a better candidate, a more interesting candidate, and probably more employable with greater leadership skills and a sense of your place in the world than you were before you started. That I can be sure of. So if the opportunity presents, I certainly would be an advocate, for giving it a crack.
I think the feeling of your first customer is definitely special. Can you maybe navigate us through that feeling to us, if you don't mind?
I feel like entrepreneurship, building a business, is full of these sort of feelings. You're often holding two competing feelings together at one time. On the one hand, you're thrilled when you see someone, in my case, in a pair of shoes, and then very, very quickly it turns to fear and maybe even by association a curiosity about whether they're enjoying it, whether they feel like it's a great experience, what else could be better about it, how did they find out about it. So you're constantly sort of juggling these feelings that are competing, and I feel like the best entrepreneurs are never too self-satisfied. In fact, they live their life almost in a permanent state of wanting to optimize, wanting to improve. In my experience, previous to starting a business, I played sport, and it's a similar sort of mindset. You're always looking for that incremental improvement. And so I was always elated, and then I was always curious, and then I was always a little scared. And I learned over time to hold both of those kind of competing feelings together and celebrate both of them.
I think in football, you have to decide a lot of times when to take the shot and when not to take the shot. I think for aspiring entrepreneurs, they often struggle with the metaphorical taking the shot with their ideas. What's one thing that you can say or give advice to people when they're unsure about when to take their leap in their ideas?
I can't give advice except to sort of say it's very easy to have an idea. It's much harder to put it out into the world and find out if someone other than your mum is going to actually take money out of their wallet and give you that for your product or service. And that gets scary, and it almost inevitably comes with disappointment and defeat. And so most don't do it. So all I would suggest is, I don't know when the right time is, and it's usually whenever that moment arises, you've just got to go do it. And when you do it, when you have the courage to go do it, good things come. And so in really simple terms, there is no good time, but it's better, in my opinion, to give it a crack than to be one of those people that had an idea they never started and were waiting for that perfect moment, because it never arrives.
Could I ask when that moment was for you personally then? Like, did you know when you were launching it, did you kind of have a feeling of when?
I didn't write a business plan. I didn't sit down and imagine the path to what ultimately would become a public company one day. It was a curiosity project, and I pursued it as such. And then along the way, I realized it could be a business, and then I couldn't find another job. So almost by default, I actually had to embark on trying to turn it into something real. So sometimes the biggest decisions that we make aren't even decisions at all. They become some sort of inevitable outcome of just working at something. So, which brings you back to what do you start working on? Start working on something that you care about, something that you love, maybe something that's right under your nose that you would be doing anyway. And usually, when you dig back into the origin stories of businesses that have gone on to be successful, it usually comes from something right under someone's nose, something that they developed mastery in or an obsession in, almost by accident, by default, and then they pursued it, and it's become almost accidentally a business. Not always, and not to suggest that there's no place for business plans or strategy, but I think sometimes the best businesses are hiding in plain sight.